Well, maybe a little bit of the history. Why now? First of all, we started on this well over 6 years ago, actually, before I became governor. We have interdicted more drugs into highway than in history. The highway patrols basically changed their whole purpose of looking at what they can do to do interdiction. Why does Ohio get hit? Well, we have good things going for us in terms of location, but we also are a major artery. When you think about Ohio, we're only a day's drive from Mexico. The drug cartels come through our state. We have a great transportation system, and we're only a few hours from Chicago. So it becomes an artery, and as the highway patrols become more aggressive, we believe we're beginning to see that artery change. We've driven up the cost of being a drug dealer here in the state of Ohio, and so we're seeing progress on that. Secondly, it should be noted that as a result of the work that we did with the medical community, we've seen a 20% drop in the number of prescriptions. That's real success. And you heard the reports on doctor shopping and reports on the ability to go to emergency rooms and all that. That stuff is now pretty well behind us. Now, why did we move sooner? We didn't move sooner because we wanted, first of all, to have these voluntary guidelines. You have two choices. You can either shove stuff down people's throats, or you can work cooperatively. And because we work cooperatively with all the prescriber community, we've seen this 20% drop. Now, Dr. Applegate has been studying since we went through those guidelines, looking at the practices of people. See, if you slam everything down, you have an access problem. Then people can't see a doctor. Doctors just say, I'm not participating. If you got a problem, don't come to me. And so, by working this thing over time, we've gotten in a position of where we can take a look at the prescribing practices, which are reasonable. And we find that there are outliers. So we were then in a position now to move as quickly as we can and as firmly as we can to crank down even more. So now you hear about the 7-day and 5-day limits, which is going to work. And why is it going to work? Because the community's buying in. And secondly, Dr. Applegate is clear on this. I want you to understand, there are going to be places where it will not be acceptable to prescribe anything. Okay, that's just a fact. She's now cranking that down. Why does this matter? Well, the legislature, I give them a lot of credit, they gave us the power to have these boards draw these regulations and rules. So we don't have to go through any kind of legislative process on this. It's done. These boards have all agreed to implement this. Now, if the doctor is an outlier, you know what happens to the doctor? They can lose their license. There's no ease in all this. You are going to have to abide by these rules. And if you don't, you're going to be in serious trouble. Whether you're a doctor, a dentist, a nurse, it doesn't matter across the board. And why will that be effective? It'll be effective because all the boards have bought in. So we're all working in the same direction. We're all doing the same things that we need to do. So I'm very pleased about this. We have a number of other initiatives that you'll be hearing about. And what we have found on this is that we have to constantly evolve. There's always something we find out that we need to do that can help us to get on top of this. And we have made progress, make no mistake, but the progress isn't enough. Let me just suggest one other element of all this. We're spending about $1 billion fighting this. We're interdicting people on our highways. FORS is up, and the doctors and all the prescribers are now reporting to FORS. We've seen the drop in prescribing. We're now going to the 7- and 5-day limit, all these kinds of things. But there's another element of this, and that is the public itself. On Friday, I'll be meeting with a number of religious leaders to talk about what happens in their churches. I don't know if we're going to have rabbis, I certainly hope so, and if they're not invited, they ought to be invited. I don't care who they are. If they're there on Saturdays or Sundays, and they're out there in a position to be able to influence their various congregations, we want them to do that. We have, as you know, Start Talking. We've got the schools involved, the patrols involved in that. Look, part of the reason why this happens, and I know many, many cases of this, part of it is that sometimes young people go to school and they experiment, and the next thing you know, they're addicted. But there is, and that's a problem. You know, it's like we have to tell our children or our young people to stay away from the drugs. It's not unusual for me to talk to college students where I warn them about this problem of going to a party on a Friday night, and one of their buddies says, hey, there's a bowl of pills, let's take one. I mean, this is a problem. This is not somebody that's doing anything other than going to college and trying to get an education, and they just sort of stumble their way into this addiction. But there's another group. The other group are people who feel as they don't matter, that they can't find work, or they are underemployed, and they become, in a way, hopeless. Now, those are our responsibilities too. In other words, the ability for all of us to reach out and love somebody who's down on their luck cannot be underestimated. I mean, what it gets down to is, as I tell my children, I don't even tell my kids about this anymore. The reason why I don't tell them is I've told them so many times, and my wife has told them so many times, you tell your kids over and over and over again, you gotta be careful you don't overdo it. Where they say, oh, well, what is this all about, you know? But they got it. I hope they're strong enough that when the temptation comes to hang out with their peers or their friends or their cousins or whoever, that they say no. But I think we also have this obligation to these people who are down on their luck, right, Doctor? Dr. Hurst is a psychiatrist, down on their luck, and they're looking for escape. That's the community. See, it's not unusual for me to go to a restaurant and see a bunch of people sitting at a table with kids. I walk over and say, please don't do drugs. I mean, I get out of my comfort zone to stick my nose into somebody else's business. We need to increasingly stick our noses into somebody else's business. Because as we become more dysfunctional at the community level, bad things happen. So it's a partnership. You know, we're spending the money, we're busting the people, the limits are in, the doctor shopping, shutting down the pill mills, all these things are in place. But no one should think that this gets completely solved just by people at the State House trying to do something. It has to be solved in our civic organizations, in our schools, in our churches, in our synagogues, at the Little League game, at the basketball playoff games. The word has to be out. And if you're hurting, and you need a little love, we've got plenty of love to give if we think about it. Give it to somebody else. Give them a little hope, a little pat on the back, can make a big difference in terms of the ultimate results here. There's 7 or 8 of us that are putting these guidelines into place. These, by the way, are in many respects more stringent than the CDC guidelines, which are kind of broad. But we think it's appropriate because of the steps that we have taken. And we're winning this battle, but we have a long way to go in winning the war. As a young man, I can remember this fight going all the way back to Nancy Reagan saying, just say no. For those that are young here, young reporters, she was the wife of Ronald Reagan. This has been a huge, huge problem. And a problem of substance just doesn't, it's just not today. If you think about the 12th step, that was about alcohol, the destruction of the family. Come from an alcoholic family, and it's a challenge for how you live and how you see the world. I mean, this issue of substance has been around forever. And some of it comes from this sense that I need to escape my troubles. That's why it means that all of us have to have a partnership from the top to the bottom. You're going to hear more initiatives from us. I want the people of Ohio to know that we're all working aggressively here. This is one of those issues that, thank God, supersedes party or philosophy. People of Ohio want to know that we're on top of this as much as we can. But we also want to ask the people of Ohio to aggressively join our partnership from top to down. And we do that, we're going to have better games, less death, more success, healthier communities, healthier families, and more young people with a bright future. So